All right, welcome to another episode of The Profit Formula. I'm Paul Wilson Jr., co-host. I'm riding solo today. My other co-host, he's kind of behind the camera, doing some post-production stuff and production activities, but it's all good because we're a multifaceted team. But we're excited for this episode because we're going to be talking about maybe a topic that actually impacts us all every single day. I just generally label it the economy. But something even more specific called the Doomsday clock, which you may or may not have heard of. But I got an expert today that's going to talk to us about that. We're going to talk about some business entrepreneurship, right? Try to decipher some of the chaos that's happening around us. Some things we need to be thinking about as we plan going forward. So it's my privilege, and I'm excited for this interview. Jice Johnson is a proud mother, U.S. Army veteran, and award-winning businesswoman committed to economic empowerment, leadership development, and personal transformation. A passionate advocate for Black entrepreneurship and equity, she also helps leaders of all backgrounds align their lives with values, master work-life integration, and shift their mindset for success. She's been recognized by the Denver Business Journal, Urban League Foundation, and Colorado Black Women for Political Action. Jice is a thought leader in business, leadership, and equity. And since founding Black Business Initiative, BBI, in 2015, her work has expanded to include the AYA Foundation, the EDA for Black communities, and co-founding Denver's first Black woman-led venture fund. Through her consultancy, By Design, she helps leaders and entrepreneurs achieve clarity, confidence, and sustainable success. Jice lives by her highest values, integrity, and legacy, ensuring that her work leaves a lasting impact for future generations. Welcome to the Profit Formula.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here. So we initially connected last year at the Go Global Conference.
Yep.
That was here in Atlanta. So got to start to learn a little bit about, of course, one another as well in terms of the work we do, which is very similar, and what you were doing in Denver, which is you're kind of still traveling back and forth between Atlanta and Denver.
Yep, I go back
to
back
do
and
that.
forth.
Yep, absolutely. And so actually, let's start there because in terms of what kind of initiated your passion for entrepreneurship and the great work that you're doing in the community, and in particular the Black community, for entrepreneurs.
Oh goodness, I feel like my passion for entrepreneurship started coming out fresh out the military.
Okay.
I got out, for in a family situation. We'll leave it like that. But when I left the military, I really didn't have a plan B.
Okay.
I had intended when I went in, I thought I was going to do 20 years, and this was, this was my plan.
Right.
I learned a lot about the positioning of the United States while I was in the military. I had an opportunity, if we'll call it that, to deploy to Iraq and participated in the Iraqi freedom. And so that really shifted my perspective of what I was doing in the military and why I thought I went to the military.
Right.
And so leaving there, not really having a backup plan, having a family in complete disarray. I was in the process of getting a divorce. I had just had a baby and not really sure what my next steps were. And I was introduced to entrepreneurship through multi-level marketing. And so I've been introduced to
I think we all probably at some point got introduced to entrepreneurship and Primerica, you about to say. Right.
And I think, I think what was fortunate for me at that time was I saw two things. So actually I was introduced to Primerica right here in Atlanta. And my upline at the time, going a couple layers up, but was Sam Shepard, who was Primerica's first Black millionaire. So what I saw for the first time that I saw was a millionaire who, if you've ever had an opportunity to visit like his home or just kind of see his lifestyle, you get that sense and understanding. But I had not met a Black person who was a millionaire that wasn't in entertainment.
Got you.
And that was the first time of like, there is a business sense here, right? And so, at some point I departed from Primerica, but I left with a lot of lessons and ideas and thoughts.
And there's some systems that actually can be duplicated, replicated in other industries.
Whatever you think about multi-level marketing, and I think there's a wide range of ways that people could think about multi-level marketing. There are some legitimate opportunities in there. Primerica is a licensed business, right? Or insurance is a licensed business, right? And so I went through the licensing process. I didn't just, stay as a small time recruit, I had people under me. I, sold the product. It really piqued my interest in understanding and learning about money.
Okay.
It piqued my interest in understanding and learning about, or even thinking differently about lifestyle. Because if you go into the military,
right,
there's a way you think about your lifestyle, because the military has a culture in and of itself.
Gotcha.
And so coming out of there and kind of having that idea that needing to rethink what my lifestyle was going to look like.
Right.
And then, but also being exposed to a lifestyle that I thoroughly enjoyed. Like, oh, we're going to the beach.
Right.
Oh, we get this nice, we're like, I ain't never been to a restaurant that was this nice, I mean, so just getting that opportunity.
Sometimes you just need that exposure, right?
Exactly.
Right, to change your perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so while I had, decided that wasn't the right business model for me, I feel like simultaneously decided that in some shape or form business was for me.
Gotcha.
And so I, certainly consider myself to be a serial entrepreneur. A lot of things that, made some money, but trying to find the right fit for what was I passionate about, what did I enjoy getting up every day to do, and also, what could I turn into a profit, and over time, what actually got me into the space of doing BBI was Tariq Nasheed.
Okay.
Or really Dr. Claude Anderson. That's what I really should say. But I was introduced to Dr. Claude Anderson through the work of Tariq Nasheed and Hidden Colors.
Okay.
And inside of Hidden Colors, I think it was Hidden Colors 2, I believe. But there's this segment where Dr. Claude Anderson is talking about how the Black community is an underclass in the United States. And essentially that we would always be that way because we didn't understand economics and we didn't understand business.
Yeah.
And being, someone who at the time was inside of my business bag and still working for corporate America, but, always kind of having this side business gig, not really liking what I heard. And I was like, we're going to be an underclass.
Right.
Wait one minute.
I ain't still for that.
I don't like that. But that actually is what caused me, just in my analytical mind, to start uncovering what he was saying. And I felt like I learned a ton through those documentaries. Whatever you think of Tariq Nasheed, I learned a lot in those documentaries, and were able to tie them to experiences that I never had a name for.
Gotcha.
And then understanding the concepts of business and kind of where we sat in the economy. I did this deep dive. And in that deep dive, I came across a woman named Maggie Anderson, and she wrote My Black Year. And she had a TED Talk really discussing her family's experience of switching over everything that they purchased, or tried to switch over everything they purchased, to Black-owned companies. And I thought, I'm going to try to do that. And at the time, I'm in Denver, Colorado. And then what you realize in Denver, Colorado,
it ain't that easy.
That ain't going to happen. So, and that's how I started BBI. I was like, well, let's change this.
Try to figure it out.
And that was like the first time in all of my different entrepreneurial experiences that I was truly excited to get up about something.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's interesting as you kind of walk through that history, because even going back to the concept of an underclass, right? And because unfortunately, if you look at just the surface level of history, right, the assumption is, with the civil rights movement, everybody was equal, right? Or all these doors open. But we realize that if there is an economic freedom, all the other things are relative, right? From that standpoint. And as a matter of fact, those have been started to be even rolled back. And a lot of it, you could almost trace to say the lack of economic freedom has also led to lack of political power,
100%.
Right, that then impacts everything else, right, from that standpoint. And so some things, like, it's hard to receive that reality, even though we may not, of course, be uncomfortable with and don't like it. But some stuff is like, you got to identify it in order to break through it. Yeah. Right. And I think, and also be able to define it, right?
Yeah, I think it's a case of we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And if you include some propaganda that takes place in there and some meddling, right? We're oftentimes
some intentional
steered,
stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and I think our community in many ways has been steered into the direction that felt more comfortable, for I don't like the term white supremacy. I would generally tend to call it violent white racism. But, I think our community has been steered in many ways into those spaces, and into a box that feels comfortable. And I think in many ways we're still in those boxes today.
Yeah. Because also sometimes even like we talk about the pain that's familiar, right? Is like if I get used to it long enough, I'll still call it pain, but I'm used to it,
right?
And I just kind of keep rolling with it. Versus like say breaking out of saying it doesn't have to stay like this or be like this, and what do we need to be doing, right, to kind of change things. So so that's kind of how you got started, and so let's talk about kind of the work you're doing now. And the impact that you're having in Atlanta as well as as you continue to have in Denver.
I'm kind of new here, so if somebody want to help me make some impact in Atlanta,
but that's why you're on the show right now, right?
Right. I'm down to make some impact here in Atlanta. So yeah, I got started in Denver. Initially through an organization called Shop Talk Live, grassroots organization called Shop Talk Live. We were hosting barbershop talks or beauty shop talks around, community efforts. And that's actually how I stumbled across the Tariq Nasheed documentary in the first place. And so what I started was a for-profit business, because we can go as deep as you want to go. So you just tell me where you want to say.
Nope. We're going to go deep in a second. I'm just trying to work our way up to it, but we're about to go deep. Yeah.
There's a nonprofit complex that we have, right? And so so in my research, I was like, I'm not going to start another nonprofit.
Right. So talk about that a little bit for a second.
Yeah.
Because this is the profit formula.
Okay.
We're all about capitalism.
Okay.
Right? we're here to serve the community, but this is about businesses and growing business. But talk about that, because I think it is pervasive in our community that, let's just start a nonprofit to solve problems. That comes with its own issues. Yeah.
Well, so a couple of things. We have almost every Black nonprofit, and I would argue others as well, but I speak often from the lens of Blackness because that's where I study.
Gotcha.
So peripherally, I understand where other communities kind of sit.
Right.
So I just preface that.
Sure.
But the Black community has an oversaturation of nonprofit organizations. In my opinion, this is because we have an underdevelopment in business. And so it makes discussing money difficult for us. It makes discussing profit difficult for us. We also have a sense of tying our personal realities, and I'm not immune from this myself. I struggle here myself, right? But we often have a struggle of disconnecting our personal experiences from the work that we believe needs to be done. And so a lot of times what you'll find, I would imagine if you find someone who, I don't know, is in waste management, I'll just throw something out there, right? I don't know a lot of people who are passionate about garbage, but they may find an opportunity doing something that they can do, right? And I think if one of the things that I have learned from my father, for example, when my dad is a boomer, obviously, right? And I talked to my dad about hopes and dreams, and what did you want to be when you grew up? And he was like, I wanted to grow up, right?
Alive,
So he moved from an opportunity to an opportunity to an opportunity. My dad ended up working for PG&E, which over in California, which is where I'm born and raised, was a fantastic company to work for. We can get into their politics or their pollution or whatever, but in terms of a company that paid well, benefits, upward mobility and things like that, my father was able to carve out a very nice middle class life for me. So I've never experienced being, even though I grew up in East Oakland, never experienced what I would consider to be in the hood, ghetto, none of that. Middle class for my whole life.
Gotcha.
But that was off of the back of my father and the opportunities that he got. But my dad doesn't have, you can't talk to him about what is his passion, what is he interested in, right? He didn't really have a choice. So bringing that back to business, I think oftentimes we are encouraged to find a business that drives us, a business that we're passionate about. I even mentioned that myself, right? Like what did I want to do that got me out of the bed every day? But there are a lot of business opportunities that have nothing to do with passion at all. They're functional for the society that we live in.
And profitable.
Oftentimes very profitable. But we won't even consider them because we're like, I don't know about that. I'm not interested in that. That's not what I want to do. So a lot of times we start these businesses in places and spaces of something that we believe that we can do,
Yeah.
something that fits within our box of what we believe is our capability,
Right.
or something that we feel passionate about. And a lot of times we feel passionate about righting something that was wrong to us. And I think that at the root is where we find a lot of these nonprofits, where people aren't thinking about how to turn them into businesses. They're thinking about, how do I give away or create access to these things that I may have needed myself at one point. And so there's always this personal connection to the work that they're doing inside of this nonprofit organization. They don't run them like nonprofits. They don't understand the business structure of nonprofits. They don't understand that it's a different type of ask, but it's always still an ask. We don't have within our community the ecosystem to support our nonprofits. And so they don't become institutional. They don't become the givers of resources. They really become a need. I need these things. They are oftentimes not structured properly. They're run with friends or family, if they're run at all. And of course, you'll see tons of them that are set up well, but if you go and look at how many are created, you'll clearly find that there's an oversaturation of undercapacity, underdeveloped, businesses.
And oftentimes, and even in one city, you have several doing the same thing. Serving the same type of people, same type of population.
All
from
the
that
time.
standpoint.
I literally just had a conversation like this recently. I was tagged in a Facebook post. This just happened a week ago, if that. Tagged in a Facebook post, and someone is like, there are no Black foundations doing XYZ. And people were telling this girl, no, yes, there are. And they're tagging them. And then someone tags me. And I'm like, why y'all got to
I wasn't even in this conversation.
But I basically say, please don't start anything new. I said, please, if this is a place that you're passionate about, please go and take your passions and your talents and attach them to an organization that already exists. All these things that you're mentioning, from housing to, to business, to these things exist.
They do.
Her response was, I'm probably going to start something new anyway, because if I didn't know about them, that means that they're not effective.
Or you didn't do your research. How about that part?
Which is what I said. I said, or you just didn't do your homework, sis. And this is less about you, and it's really more about the mentality that exists when we insist. It's like an ego thing. I'm gonna start this because I can do it better than all these other people, without understanding the obstacles, the roadblocks, the mechanisms. You gonna start a nonprofit today. Good luck. It's gonna take you 6 months before your status even come in. Once you have the money to file for your status, and that you file it correctly, you got to put together your board. Oh, you're not thinking about a board.
Absolutely.
You're not thinking about that.
Nobody's giving money to anybody who hadn't had an impact. So how are you going to start the work, do the work?
They don't think about
get a track record, and then go apply.
Exactly. And then once they start trying to do grants, then they be like, wait a minute. Now you got a whole industry created on how to do grant writing.
And everybody's competing for the same grant, And even in the last year, so when my previous employer, especially in the last year, things shifted even more so. So one particular grant that Urban League had gotten, at that time when they wanted maybe 100 organizations that applied for it. After the administration changed this last year, they didn't get it for one, and then the feedback was like over 1,000 organizations that applied for the same exact grant that they were able to win before, not able to win now. And if you're a 100-year-old organization who's already been doing this work, and you got to compete that and still lose, let alone you brand new,
no track record,
nothing.
You just got an idea and a hope and a wish and a dream. And so I think that there's a lot to the emotional intelligence piece that comes into play. There's an ego thing that comes in when you got 7 organizations that are all giving away backpacks. You're not addressing why we have to give away backpacks in any way. From a policy perspective, where should the money for school supplies sit? Does that rest with the family? Does it rest with the schools? Why can't families, if it does rest with the families, afford the school supplies,
Let's go to the root of the issue.
Let's go to the root of the issue. And so sometimes we have the bleed, which is there are families that need school supplies, and we get that. But every organization can't just address the bleed. And so, and then you'll hear, well, the market is saturated. I mean, there's a lot of room, There's Sure. One organization is not going to give away all the backpacks. But none of those organizations are independently financed or
Right.
funded.
No.
So they're all looking for money to get the backpacks.
Yep.
They're all trying to give away backpacks to the same
Right.
community. They're not addressing root causes,
Right.
all the things.
Yeah.
So
no, you're right, and
it's a
probably all
complex.
sourcing them from the same place. So Walmart is probably giving 100,000 backpacks to 30 organizations, right? So whoever it is, so Walmart, they get to write it off on their taxes,
Right.
Or whoever else, right? From that standpoint, but like I said, it's still not addressing the core need. But you said something interesting about a lot of these organizations get started off of something that happened to somebody. So now I'm gonna start an organization in response to that. I was talking to actually at Morehouse yesterday, and so I had a thought, and this may connect with that. And basically, I was saying, well, when you set a goal, typically it should be something that you're aspiring to, not something that you want to do the opposite of. Right, because it's almost like you're looking this way, but to say, "Oh, my goal is over here," but the whole time it's like I'm running away from here. Versus, you know what, this is just the goal. Let me lock in on here, and
Yeah.
what can I aspire to over here? Versus just I'm just trying to be the opposite of
Yeah.
what was behind me. So when I thought about that, and as you were just saying that, a lot of organizations we started out of the pain, started out at like, well, we need to give access because I didn't have access, or this group doesn't have access. Versus really designing value, right? Because if you're in the marketplace, it's about creating value that people want,
Yeah.
right? That they chase after, not that you have to guilt people. So
Right.
in many cases, right, to give to a cause or a situation that we're also, everybody should be concerned about this. Well, but there's also different ways that impact that need too.
Right.
Right. It doesn't just have to be under a nonprofit organization.
Right.
Right. To do that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different methods. I mean, so kind of to that point, my organization is a public benefit corporation.
Right. For those who don't know, just
Yeah, so public
Educate,
benefit
yeah.
corporation is, so it's a corporation. It's like a
Right.
C corporation, but it has a social mission. And so generally speaking in business, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the business.
Right.
In a public benefit corporation or a social enterprise,
Right.
you have a responsibility to the social mission. It doesn't mean that you forego your fiduciary responsibility,
Right, right.
but it does mean that you are able to think about the social impact above the profitability of the company.
Right. Absolutely. Gotcha. So as I said, we are working our way up to the deep stuff. Because we got to get to this next topic, right? Because what I'm about to ask and you about to share does impact, and as we talk about in our community, when the rest of the world or the economy catches a cold, right, ours
Right.
catches the flu,
Absolutely.
right, and it multiplies. And so there's probably already been some impacts of feeling the flu, right, just with the things that have happened over the last year,
Yeah.
Let alone the last couple of months. So when we one of our first conversations, we talked about this doomsday clock, which I kind of randomly heard it, and I probably thought I knew what it was. I had no idea that I didn't know what it was.
Let me walk back your expert. I heard you were like the expert. I was like, well,
Right.
the novice.
The novice, right. Aspiring novice.
Yes.
You put it there. So we're talking about the economy, right? We're talking about the national debt and all these other things, how they connect. But I'm gonna just pause right there before I step off into something that doesn't even make sense what I'm about to say, and just ask you, what is the doomsday clock? And should we be scared? Because that doesn't sound like something that sounds fun.
Yeah, no.
What is the doomsday clock?
So the short version of this, and I was introduced to the doomsday clock from a friend of mine who's in military intelligence, and we
Okay.
have a lot of conversations, right?
Got you.
And so he was telling me about this doomsday clock, and I'm like, I'm listening, but I'm like, okay. So he was like, you got to look it up, Jice. You got to look it
Gotcha.
up, right? So I'm
So
like,
I just say that. So I used to think the doomsday clock was just nuclear weapons, like how close the world is to nuking each other and we just all explode. But
yes.
it's
Initially,
okay.
that's what it was measuring.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
So it was created by the same folks that that essentially put together the atomic bomb, but
Okay.
it was initially to measure how close we were, essentially to the destruction from like things that we created, right? And so
Okay, gotcha.
in this case, the invention of nuclear weapons,
Okay. Right.
presented a very real, present, and mutually destructive,
Right.
situation. So that clock was to measure, how close global tensions were to getting to a place where this might cause, global destruction.
Okay. Gotcha.
And for the most part, I think it does still predominantly measure that. But I think that they've expanded because there have been so many other man-made catastrophic, inventions, so to speak. And so it looks at other areas like climate change. It looks at now, for example, disruptive technologies like AI, right? And so how close are we on a global perspective to essentially causing our own demise?
Gotcha.
And that clock back in the 90s, when we were doing some global collaboration, and by we I mean Western countries, because I always like, at this point I think it's very clear to distinguish when Western countries are saying what they're doing versus what's happening to the rest of the world during that time. But Western countries were looking at how to form better alliances and cooperate in better ways. And so that was like the furthest that it's ever been from like doomsday. Now we're less than 90 seconds away from
So talk about doomsday. The clock. Visually, we're talking about 12 striking midnight.
12 striking midnight. We are at, what is that, 11:59.
59 and 30 seconds.
That's change, right?
Come, Lord Jesus. Lord, just come on back. So what does that mean in practice? Like those who have constructed this, and why are we at 11:59 and 30 seconds?
So I don't know how the formula works. I don't know exactly how they're measuring, proximity to. But essentially, if we're taking a look at like what's going on globally, we all know that there is a global world order change. And like I said, I think, there's some people that kind of equate that to a religious aspect and have, I have in my comments on social media, the number of people that are like, the rapture is coming, right? And I'm like, cool, I'm with you. If that's your jam. I don't, for me, that's not my jam. So, I think that, overall what it's looking at is, as global tensions are rising, right? Where do we see folks being able to pull back? And in my opinion, I'll give you an example of that. Like, I think that from a war perspective, right, China and Xi Jinping are very tempered. They're not, you do not see the Chinese volunteering to go to war. They're not volunteering to help with war. They are not, they would prefer, they've made it very clear that their preferred method of solving anything is going to be economic and diplomatic.
So even though it looks like they threaten stuff, but you're saying typically,
I don't think China threatens military almost anything.
What about Taiwan though?
Are you saying that that the Chinese are threatening military action on Taiwan?
Well, yes, in order to bring Taiwan back into the fold.
I don't think they're quite there either.
This thing is more posturing or just...
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, because if you're listening to, there's a couple of things that are happening at play, right? If the U.S. or Western powers, we'll call that, if they backed away from Taiwan, right? Because, the conversation is like, we're here to support the Taiwanese people. No, you're not. What you're here to do is be in China's backyard. And China's very clear on that. And so whether China feels like they have a right to Taiwan or not, now you're talking about thousands of years of history in terms of where Taiwan used to sit and where it sits now, and whatever, that there's a lot of history there, and I won't profess to know all of it, right? But China's a very old country, and at some point Taiwan used to be a part of China. It's not now, depending on who you talk to. But with that being said, I think if the West were to back off of Taiwan and let the Chinese and the Taiwanese people sort that out, I think that China would be less inclined to worry about Taiwan at all. They're there because the U.S. wants to be in China's backyard, and China's not going to let that happen. With, so.
That's interesting. So, a little side note. So I was born in Taiwan. My dad was in the Air Force military. And so essentially, so on my birth certificate and stuff, it actually, this is 1974. It actually says Taiwan ROC. So even back in the 70s, it was still considered at that point Republic of China. Although now they don't think they don't use ROC now. So yeah, it's like things change, things shift. From that standpoint. So that was interesting to hear your take on that, because it makes sense, right? The way you explain that. So back. Let's go back to this doomsday clock. Oh, actually, let's stay on China for a second. I think that's key, and I'll tap in. So if y'all have not seen Jice's videos, we're gonna give you a chance to give all your socials and YouTube channels. The video you sent last week that talked, because you were talking about China in relation to China and the debt and China's approach to their debt with the U.S.
Well, China's been selling off U.S. debt.
That's the part I'm talking about. So talk about that, where we used to be the whole China owns all the U.S. debt. Now they're selling it off. But should we be concerned about that versus maybe before when we were concerned that, so before we were concerned that they had it, now we should be concerned that they're selling it off. So talk about that, in that respect.
I don't know that it's necessarily that we have to be concerned specifically that China's selling it off. What I think is what the sell-off is an indication of, right? So, and I think this kind of goes to understanding that how the U.S. dollar is used throughout the world globally, right? And also not the expert, but just
I got you. But
I like to,
it's not that going to pique our interest.
Right?
Yes,
but
absolutely.
I think our interest should be piqued.
Yes.
I think that we should be understanding the economics of the world, and that's one of the, in my opinion, the most frustrating. Sometimes I talk about Americans as though I'm not one. I'd be like, listen, the Americans do this, right? And I recognize that I am American.
I am us.
I am us. But one of the frustrating things to me about Americans is that we have a very unique positioning to be able to have our head in the sand and it kind of not affect us. Gotcha. And that I think is shifting. So when they're talking about this new, global world order, and like I said, if you take it out of the context of, a biblical rapture, there have been other world order shifts that have occurred.
Right.
And really what they're saying is that the world operates under this kind of premise, and that's shifting. Gotcha. And it's shifting for a number of different reasons. It's shifting because it doesn't sit on a foundation that's sustainable.
Right.
So when the United States became the global world currency, there were ways in which the U.S. started to hold on and maintain its status in that way.
Right.
A lot of it through violence. But beyond that, when we get into things like taking us off of the gold currency or gold back and putting us on a fiat currency, now we are backed by the trust in the United States for whatever that's worth. But at some points, at a lot of points, and since that time, the trust of the United States has been worth a lot.
Right.
So there's been value there, right? You trusted the United States to be able to take care of its debts.
Yeah.
Just purely from a financial perspective, right? If you and I have a business transaction and I am starting to think that maybe you're not going to be able to deliver,
right?
Maybe you're not going to be as trustworthy as I think you are, maybe whatever it is, right?
Right.
I may start looking elsewhere, or I may start divesting from this partnership.
Yeah, because you look more risky now.
Exactly.
So I'm going to start potentially, pulling up.
And at a
back.
high level, that's what the sell-off is, right? The sell-off is saying that you may not be able to pay off all your debts, actually. We might not count on this interest payment. Also, the dollars that you're paying us back may not be worth as much as they were in the global economy as things continue to shift. We're actually trying to ensure that your dollars aren't worth as much as they have been as this, economy continues to shift. So I think the sell-off is really an indication, like when we talk about the collapse of the West, if anyone is paying attention to that concept that the West is collapsing, because there's a lot of rhetoric around that, right? But if you believe that the West is collapsing, which I do, it doesn't necessarily have to be. It's not just this president, right? Although we could say a lot about this president and him speeding up these things. It's not just this president. It's that the conditions under any president at this point would not allow for this to continue, but for so long. And so, how long? How fast? It happens. I believe that this administration is certainly accelerating the pace, breaking alliances, the alliances that were already strained, but not broken. is shifting world orders, right?
Right.
When we're looking at the the rise of BRICS, which, if for your audience that may not be familiar, BRICS is a global economic bloc. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And now several other nations have either joined or become partner organizations or partner countries, rather, that have joined that BRICS alliance. But these are countries that, quite frankly, are just sick and tired of the United States putting their boot on their economic neck. They are not able to grow their economies. The U.S. is and the West in general is incredibly extractive.
Right.
And so a lot of times we're shielded from the type of violence that's happening. And so like some of that we see, like children and mines, for example, that feels very violent, but it's beyond that. It is saying that you have a product, or you have a mineral or a resource or something of value in your country, and we are not going to allow you to grow industry. If you do attempt to grow industry, we're going to sanction you and cut you off from the global supply of money. And if we feel like sanctions aren't going to work, we're going to invade your country. We are going to kill your democratically elected leaders, even though we're telling you that democracy is what's working. We are going to arm opposition and flood your streets with violence, right? Like, these are the things that are happening in so many countries in order for us to experience what we experience here.
Right.
And China played a very different, game, which is how they move their military. Not military, their middle class.
Right.
But it was through the trade partnership. But China is always the friendly enemy, right?
Right.
We cool.
Right.
We got our eye on you, right? I mean, so
on each other, right. And also, along those lines too, what a lot of people now have been paying attention to, is it true that the credit rating agencies last year lowered the rate of the U.S. government?
Yes.
Right.
So all three. And Moody's was the last one last year.
Okay.
So you have
Standard & Poor's, S&P, is that?
Yes, that did that in 2011, I believe.
Okay.
Fitch was in, I think, 2023. I don't have my notes in front of me, but then you have Moody's last year.
Right.
So that was the last of the three major, credit agencies that were ranking the U.S. So our credit ratings have dropped.
Gotcha. Which for the basic person, if your and I's credit rating drop, it's going to be harder for us to get money. It's going to be more expensive, right? Which means the same for the U.S. government.
Yeah, I mean,
at a whole different level. But
right. Because of who's doing the lending, right? The lending is coming from people who are purchasing U.S. debt.
Right.
And U.S. debt is less attractive.
Right.
And so which is also where you have the sell-off, right? That would almost be equivalent to, like, you have an open credit card, but because your credit score dropped, your credit bureau, the credit company closes your line of credit.
Right.
Even if you're like, I didn't even miss a payment.
Right.
But they deemed that you're less creditworthy, right? So they're going to cut you off even before you get a chance to mess it up.
Right. Exactly. They try to get ahead of the curve.
They try to get ahead of the curve.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, like, China's not the only one that has done massive sell-offs, but I think, from a geopolitical perspective, let's say you have, like, a country like Japan, which is one of our allies, and China's not our ally.
Right.
And so Japan has had some sell-off as well, but that's not going to be highlighted in the same way because that's our ally. Whereas like China, an adversary, it's highlighted that they're selling off our debt.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so these things we talked about China, but the BRICS I think are interesting too, right? Because did they recently do like a free trade agreement among the BRICS or some type of agreement where they can trade among each other more easily?
Well, so there's the African. It's AFTA. It's the African
free trade agreement.
Yeah, but it's a free trade agreement.
Gotcha.
Yes,
right.
For all 54 countries and China are trading. There's also a lot of south to south trade now. So those are just like countries. I mean, those are global south countries that are trading with
each other,
their own currencies.
Gotcha.
And so a lot has come off in terms of every country having to trade in U.S. dollar.
Right.
But one of the things that's happening over on the continent of Africa are like the rise and the increase of fintech, so that people can, this concept of trading money and moving money where you need it to go is costly, it's expensive, it can be very prohibitive. And so there's been a lot of real world solutions that are coming online. And then country to country, they're testing out ways that they can, operate in which they haven't in 100 years, right? As the U.S. has been that dominant, currency.
So you almost had to trade in the U.S. dollar, but now they're finding ways not to have to use the U.S. dollar.
Right. Well, and then
to trade.
This is where, it's less popular. I think this is one of the things that this administration is kind of like, to a certain degree, kind of taken back by the world, right? Is because despite how they have been, what you don't see now is invasions. And so you might see countries like, for example, France with the Sahel region, where they want to keep their claws in the Sahel, even though technically the Sahel, let's take Burkina Faso as a prime example, but like Burkina Faso, and then again, for those of you that don't know, it's like one of three of the Sahel Alliance's states or nations. So that's Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. But essentially, these are like they were French colonies, right? And so they've effectively kicked France out, and they're independent countries now, but France wants to keep their claws in industry and kind of try to hold them to past, obligations and things like that. As this has been shifting, this is where they're trying to perform coups, right? Or why they try to stage things like, we need to come in there and help you get rid of the terrorism in your country, is because that's their way to keep their claws in. Because it's not popular. It's not deemed to be acceptable to come in and invade countries anymore and decide that you're going to take them over. So because they don't do that, technically, they have to have these other, mechanisms,
economic mechanisms and other
exactly. And this is where so two countries that are now deciding that they're going to trade in their own currency, or that they're going to bypass the U.S. dollar system, for example, for the most part, they're able to do that until it comes to oil. Now you have a petrodollar issue. So there, I think almost what's happening over in Iran, and by the time this is released, who knows what will be happening over in Iran. But, Iran making the claim that in order for you to get through the Strait of Hormuz, you need to essentially, trade outside of U.S. dollar is it's a middle finger to the petrodollar. So there's, I think there's a lot when you're talking about like what is happening, what could happen, and there's infrastructure being created. So whether that's, Bitcoin, stablecoin, they all of the different types of opportunities now to do cross-border trading and cross-border settlements, outside of the U.S. dollar. They already exist. They are becoming more popular. They're solidifying, what the infrastructure looks like. And various countries are looking at what types of policy and legislation that they need to put in place in order to support this. And so when we're fully in a multipolar world, I don't know, but the fact that we are for sure headed there is definitive. And in many cases, we might already be there. But it's certainly not as widespread as it will be, over the next couple of years.
And the further we go along in that fintech space and that digital currency, as that becomes even more pervasive and accessible, that to me, that helps accelerate that even more.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
It sounds like that would make sense. Right. But then also, if we're talking about digital, talking about technology, can't have any conversation these days without talking about AI. So how does AI also then now play a role? In particular, let's getting back to this 11:59 and 30 seconds on the Doomsday clock. How does AI impact what's happening from that standpoint? Because it seems like AI is the double-edged sword. It's the greatest of things, and then it can be the worst of things, right? So, what's your thoughts on how that plays into this?
For me, I'm still curious on AI myself. I'm still digging into the reports and the research and the predictions and kind of all those things. So I don't feel like I have a good grip on that. What I will say is that we do know that there's a huge environmental impact that comes with AI. We do know that there is a future of work situation that's coming with AI, right? And so what does work look like with AI? I don't know if y'all have seen now, they have a new video circulating that is real, because I looked into that, but where they're talking about the replacement of teachers with robots.
No, I didn't see that. But I did notice, did you see the White House event earlier this week or last week? So Melania and a robot come into the, I don't know if it's a press conference or this demo, right?
Yes. So we're talking about the same thing. So
okay, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Well, I saw that clip. I didn't realize it was about the robot replacing teachers.
Yeah, I mean, if you dig, to me, that's where it sounded like it was going.
Okay.
I mean, they're saying what the robots could effectively teach, right?
Right.
And it's like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so yes, I did see that.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a lot of, I think that there's a lot of speculation in terms of what AI can and can't do.
Right.
We do know, I think it's been pretty clear now that their projections for what AI can do are inflated. And we know that there's a lot of they've outdone themselves. I mean, it's a .com bubble, but for AI.
Right.
And I think some folks are trying to walk it back, but it's difficult to walk back all the investment that's been made.
Right. Because those investors want to return, right?
They do want to return
on their investments.
Facts, yes.
Right. So if you took the money, it's almost like if you took the money, don't give us the money back.
Right.
Go do what
Well, and what's also interesting is like who's trading. I mean, where the money is coming from, because a lot of them reportedly are investing in each other. And so, I mean, it kind of goes back to the very thin veil of what is the U.S. economy right now, because there really isn't growth. So, I've asserted, and again, without having my notes directly in front of me and all the things that I've written down about it, but I've asserted that, as far as I'm concerned, they're flat out lying. I think that the country is in negative growth, because the only growth that we have seen, or that's really being reported, is in AI. It's in the infrastructure for AI.
Right.
And also that's overinflated. Right. You know what I mean? So when we're looking at virtually no growth in the U.S. economy, but we are also looking at a growing debt, which is why, I encourage people to go and find out, essentially what they call a debt spiral. Because, and this is why I say there's not, from all historical aspects and from all the math, the math doesn't math for what's happening. We have, what you have is a growing amount of debt.
Right.
And the interest is going to continue to compound on that. And so even at the rate that we're currently seeing it, it'll continue to go up.
Gotcha.
And you have no growth. And so even when we're talking about like GDP, if you're only getting GDP from companies that are essentially moving money back and forth between each other.
Right. That's not real growth.
And you're not getting production from the people. Then what are we really talking about?
Especially
then when you look
trying to reduce all the people, that's even less production.
Right, which is where I was going next. Right. So
okay,
now
gotcha.
But no, you're right on. I mean, now you're also talking about the fact that we have a declining workforce.
Right.
And so there's no expectation that we're going to see a growth in production, because we're producing less.
Right.
But we owe more.
Right.
And so somewhere here it just doesn't work. What the collapse looks like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I would question anyone who claims that they do know. I think there's a lot of predictions about different aspects of what would happen. I think some of what's predicted depends on how fast other countries move to that multipolar space.
Right.
The impact is lessened globally if by the time it collapses, the dollar isn't the predominant, currency, for example, or countries feel like they have a second or third option.
Right, and they can kind of shift. Yeah, right.
So, I mean, I think that there's this kind of competition, or, that there's a game being played right now as to how fast can these things, get online, before this very clear financial situation that's not sustainable explodes.
Right. Yeah. And that's interesting. I was listening to another podcast about talk about all these AI companies competing with one another. And one of the things that they said I thought was really interesting is that they all perpetuate this myth that AI, right, is going to quote unquote eventually destroy the world, but we're going to be the ones to save the world with our AI.
With our AI.
Right. The rest of them are the bad guys.
Right.
We're the good guys.
Our iRobot is the one, right?
Exactly right. But they all believe that, right? Our approach is going to be right. The rest of them, and so, but like I said, but if they're all, they're still all fighting to be number one, right, and they're taking all these resources, right, and not just the financial, because the more you learn about, the data centers. Right, that are now have to be built, right, in order to feed this growth. These data centers are probably worse than any of the data centers that have been built to this time, right? In terms of like the environmental impact, the health impact, on people and what's needed to run it. The water that's just needed, right? So fortunately, I think and I say fortunately because again, we all benefit and there's definitely good uses of it, but we have started to see cities push back on, allowing data centers to come into their communities. Hopefully that will, there'll be some balance there, right? But sometimes the dollar is a little hard to,
Well, I
to
have
walk away
questions.
from.
I mean, I do think that we should push back. I think that we should figure out how to temper.
Right.
I have questions about how that's going to work in reality because there's investments that have been made.
Right.
There's nothing else propping up the economy. You'd have to start making investments in other directions, which this administration
But all the
has.
manufacturing jobs are coming back to the U.S., right? Oh, sorry. Continue.
This administration has defunded, quite a bit of the types of things, and I'm not a fan of the Biden administration. And to be clear, I'm not Democratic or Republican, so I'm not a fan. I can critique both sides.
Right, equally.
No problem.
Right.
I will say that the Biden administration was looking at how to invest in manufacturing.
Okay.
From the government perspective.
Right.
And so they were looking at investing in like the CHIPS Act, and they were looking at, building technology. That important technologies that need to be built. This administration's approach seems to be if we punish everyone else or punish corporations for being elsewhere, that they'll come back here without really counting the cost of time to build out the industries. You'd have to do kind of what they're doing now, which is like tank the U.S. economy. I mean, like right now I have an assistant working for me in Nigeria. They make $6 an hour. I'm not purporting that $6 an hour is amazing, but $6 an hour works for them in Nigeria.
Right.
There's no possible way that I could pay anybody $6 an hour here in the US, right? And so any notion or idea that people who are going to be paying someone over there what would be considered great wages for them at $10 or $12 or $15 an hour or even $20 an hour is not going to come here and have to start at 20, 25, 30 or whatever an hour to bring all of those positions back here, not to include the tax, implications, not to include the benefits and healthcare, costs that are here that other, that they get to leverage in other countries.
Right.
I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The industries are not coming back. The U.S. messed that up.
Yeah.
Sorry, because I didn't ask if I could cuss on here before I started, so I had to pull that back.
This is the family show, right?
Messed that up. I stayed right on track. Okay, gotcha. The U.S. messed that up. Yeah. That's a done deal, right? Yeah. And so. So now what does the U.S. do, right? I think I got questions on it. I have been heavy into the research of where does the U.S. economy go from here?
Right.
I don't know that I have those answers yet.
Sure.
I mean, I feel like I'm still trying to sort through what that looks like.
Right.
I think we have an aging population.
Definitely.
That's not going to turn around, right? With the cost of living.
Increase.
I got 3, but if I had to do it again, so which one of them I would drop off? But we have to be thinking about where this country is going. And also, at least in my studies right now, some of the things that I've been looking into are where are other countries that have essentially fallen off the map, right? Like like what's happening in Greece these days.
Right.
What's happening in Rome, right? I mean, there are places that are trying to pay people to come to the country and start building here because they're outside of tourism for their ruins.
They don't have
anything else going on, right? So, you know, I don't think that becomes the U.S., but I think if you ever get the privilege of traveling, and I recognize it's a privilege, I think anyone who has had the privilege of traveling that can break away from a Western lens for a moment, even just for a moment, will recognize that much more of the world is developed than they think. There is a lot of opportunity for a lot less cost. There are a lot more and greater amenities that you can get in other places. And that the U.S. in many ways is falling apart in a lot of places. The infrastructure is
bridges
old.
And roads and
you know, and you get to some of these other places and you're like, oh,
they got new things going
I didn't know. So you know, I wonder what that flip will look like. You know, I think that's part of the conversation about the change in the world order, right? It's like, what will this look like when the new middle classes of the world are being built in the global South? And that's just factual. The population growth is happening in the global South.
So that's a lot. That's a lot. And that's one of the reasons why I definitely wanted you here, because I knew we're going to unpack some things that oftentimes don't get talked about. Right. From that standpoint. So with all that, what do we do as individual business owners, right? What would you, any recommendations, or even as organizations that support businesses and entrepreneurs? Because also, right, it's not realistic that, you know, 50% of the folks can up and leave and go to some other country. So you're going to be here, right? Most people are going to be here. Right? And have to work through it, live through it, operate through it. So any recommendations that you would have, right, for businesses?
I plan on being one of the ones that leave.
For the people who are left behind.
I don't want to suffer through this. I feel like I could do bad all by myself somewhere else. For those that, but yeah, if you plan on staying in the U.S., you know, so I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll just kind of, you know, maybe bullet them. But like, one is I think that the Black community in particular needs to really focus on building parallel systems. And in my mind, a parallel system is exactly what it sounds like. It is building something outside of or parallel to the system that, you know, the systems that we know. I think that there is a significant amount of mindset shifts that have to take place within our community in order to build. One of the examples that I use all the time is Amazon. Because I just want, for some folks, maybe Gen Z probably can't think back this far. Gen Alpha, that's hilarious. But if you're at least a millennial, you can think back to when Amazon did not have same day delivery. You could think back to when Amazon didn't even have next day delivery. You can think back to before they created Amazon Prime. If you are a seller on Amazon, you may be able to remember when you could actually make a decent profit on Amazon. What's interesting, and thinking about it from a business perspective, is we're very clear that the reason why none of us have an Amazon or would ever be able to create an Amazon is because there's no organizations that would invest in our business for almost 2 full decades at a loss in order for us to create what Amazon is. If Amazon had been operating like any of our businesses, if it had been operating out of Jeff Bezos' personal pocket, or even off of the equity in his home, or even off of a personal credit card, or even off of some friends and family investment. If Jeff Bezos had to operate the same way that we have to operate, Amazon wouldn't exist. Because Amazon was not profitable for almost 2 full decades.
That's crazy.
So really what we're talking about is a strategic positioning for whoever decided, the powers that be, I don't know who those powers are, but someone said, we're going to use this as the vehicle to essentially destroy small business. Walmart, similar, in its nature, right? Because Walmart is heavily subsidized by U.S. government.
Right.
A lot of the folks who we have come to admire as business geniuses or as business gurus are heavily subsidized, heavily
Even
invested
Elon
in.
Musk.
I'm
sorry.
In my mind, I was envisioning.
Right.
Like, are you kidding me?
No.
I mean, forget the fact that he comes from a family literally through apartheid that essentially had what would be the equivalent of like slave labor to build their empire in present day, right? Because that's not like some generations back. That's just his dad.
Right.
And then to use that, to like move forward, but also, to go after the types of government contracts, right, that they have. Yeah, wild work. So we praise some of these folks as being like these business geniuses when really these folks are well networked, well resourced. Even when they have their, rags to riches story, their rags are some very clean, white, tidy, neatly folded rags. These ain't no. They got some very amazing rags, right? Linen, silk, silk rags. And so I look at that and remind us that like the things that we think we need, we don't need. What they take is more planning. When I as an avid Target shopper, when the Target boycott started, right? It was like, oh God, where am I going to shop? I mean, it only took me a couple of days to figure out where else I was going to shop, but it was more of a mental situation than anything else to be like, you like this place and now you're not going to shop here.
Right.
And me, I'm a huge boycotter. Like my list of boycott is long. I'm not trying to convince nobody else where not to shop.
Right.
I just am a boycotter of my own dollars. Right. And so all those, I don't shop at Walmart. I haven't done since the murder of Trayvon Martin. I don't shop at Amazon now. This is probably going into my second year not shopping at Amazon.
Okay.
I obviously no longer shop at Target. I mean, so, but I have a lot of places that I don't shop. What I'm clear on is that with some planning, the way I used to plan before these things were like how they are today.
So convenient.
I was It's the convenience. And that convenience is a killer of movement. So like what do businesses need to do? For starters, shift your mindset around convenience because the convenience has us locked into systems that we know are harmful to our businesses, that we know are killing our profitability, that we know are killing our ability to create markets that actually work for us in our community. Right. That convenience is a killer. Right. But developing parallel markets is something that we have to do. I don't know any other way to say that. Okay. But we've got. We just have to do that. Right. Because the only other alternative to that is to continue to do what we're doing now, which is to come to folks who have blatantly told us that they do not care to do business with us. They believe that doing business with us is purely based on race. It's not based on quality. It's not based on expertise. It's not based on capacity. They believe that it's a handout, right? They believe that they're doing us a favor. And if I'm doing you a favor, I treat you very differently than if I feel like this is a mutual exchange. Absolutely. So we have to recognize that systemically, not on the individual who's able to break the system or break through the system, because there's a propaganda tactic for that. That's not.
If one can do it, you all can do it.
Exactly. Right. And if we fall for that, and sometimes I look at some very intelligent people and I be like, but did you fall for that? Right. Okay. So we know that that's what the system is. Right. We have no choice but to, I shouldn't say it that way. That's very definitive. But if we want the best opportunity for us to really build is like that. And I think, a lot of as I talk about parallel systems, a lot of the comments I've received are things like they've destroyed what we've built. And that's true. But I think that we're in a new day and time. So very much like the French is not going to come into Burkina Faso and hostily take that country back over. Right. They're going to have to try something sneaky, but they're not going to come in and just start
come through the front door.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think it's the same way. Yeah. Like we'll never experience another Tulsa, Oklahoma, because the day and time doesn't allow for them to come in and bomb our stores. And that's not a thing. And so we have to heal from the knowing of what has happened to us in the past.
Right.
We have to be vigilant.
Right.
I'm not saying to relax.
Right. No,
I'm saying
absolutely.
be vigilant.
Yes.
Because they'll figure out another way.
Right.
But it's not going to be that way.
Right. Right.
And so I think we have to be thinking about how we build. Yeah. I do think that we need to be thinking about industry.
Right. Agreed.
Industries are shifting.
Right.
And so every business should probably do an assessment on the viability of their current industry.
Right.
And where they're going.
Gotcha.
Start pivoting before you have no choice but to pivot, or before you are obsolete.
So pivot now.
Yeah, start pivoting now.
Pivoting now.
Yeah, I mean, so do some deep research on that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So no, this has been good, And one thing I'll just kind of tag on, and I'll give you kind of a final thought or nugget to share. You talk about healing, and I think that part is crucial. 'Cause I think a key part of that healing is not to revert back to the same thing, right? Because you can't really be healed and say, I'm gonna go back and keep doing what I was doing before and pretend like I'm healed, right? Because that healing really takes a different mindset, right? And biblically speaking, that would be called repenting, right? where you literally have to go a different direction,
yes,
right? Not just saying I'm sorry,
right?
Is no, I got to shift directions, and I think which is going to take a massive shift. But it starts one person at a time. It starts with people like yourself who've dug into some of these things, and like I said, and I know if y'all jump on her stuff, because she'll walk you through like a teacher. I know we couldn't go too deep in some of these areas, but I thought it was good that we could at least expose it. So final thoughts, and of course share people can get in contact with you.
Yes. No, well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
This was great. Yeah. I always like to talk about what I think we should be thinking about as a Black community in particular. But yeah, I think, my final thought would really be, if you haven't been paying attention, now is the time to pay attention.
Definitely.
And things are moving, but it's not too late to start figuring out what your next move is for yourself, for your family, for our community. And I think we need to be talking to each other a little bit more. Yeah. And to that point, healing, right? Mm-hmm. We have to be able to move past what hasn't worked for us because we're in a different time and things are moving very rapidly and we're getting left behind and we don't even know it. So yeah. Good. Open our eyes.
All right. Open your eyes. People, you hear that?
Yes.
Jice Johnson.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
You can find me pretty much Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Substack at Jice Johnson.
Gotcha. That's Jice Johnson. Absolutely. Well, we thank you, Jice, for being here. We thank you to our audience who are watching this. And if nothing else, challenge you to think about just the things that you see every day, the news headlines that you see, stuff that you read on social media. Let's dig a little bit deeper, right? We all need to get more aware, more educated, so we can all be better prepared to help our communities move forward. And again, it's not just enough that you know it. You also need to be able to share that with somebody else. So again, it's been our privilege to be here to host you. I'm on the show. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share with all your friends, families, and everybody that you know. And so we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Profit Formula. Thanks.